Okay. Hello, everyone. So I'm very pleased to welcome our next speaker. Brent has been living with HIV for 25 years, nearly half of their life, and has been working in the response to HIV for nearly 35 years. Welcome, Brent. So it's my pleasure to get to just interview you today a little bit. And I wonder if you can start by just telling us a bit about who you are. So, you know, anything you think is important for us to know about you.
So I think what the important things to know are I've recently, at the ripe age of 53, started accepting my non-binary status. I think that it's important that we, throughout our lifetimes, acknowledge those points of revelation. For me, those revelation points would have been coming out as gay, coming out publicly as a person living with HIV, and now as a person who identifies as non-binary. And I hope throughout the rest of my life that I will have more epiphanies and more revelations to make. But I think these are the important times and the important things to share. The reason I sound like this, like you, is because I'm actually a Canadian by birth. Grew up here in the prairies, and now live with my partner of 23 years in Australia. We both live with HIV openly, and we've been working together to challenge stigma, discrimination, criminalization. He's a lawyer. I probably work more sort of in the public health and community health fields. What else can I say? Living with HIV for me was, or coming out as HIV positive, was not a shock. I think this is something that as older people, I remember vividly the first time I ever heard about HIV. I was in year 9. I was walking to junior high school, and I'd always walk to junior high school and then back for lunch. And I, at lunchtime, listened to the radio, CBC, and they were talking about this thing called GRID, and they were talking about Rock Hudson, and I thought to myself, like, because I already knew I was gay, but I thought to myself, oh well, then I'm going to have to get that. Like, I never ever thought that I just thought that everyone would get it. That was kind of my belief at that time, and started working in the response to HIV when I was 19. And worked for 10 years before seroconverting. Tried my best to minimize risks and everything else, but things take their turn. And I guess the thing about seroconverting when you work in the HIV industry that's interesting is the response you get from your colleagues. I felt I had two options. I could either, try to live quietly, and let me tell you, Lordy, I don't live anything quietly. So I just decided to come out full lather to everyone. And two of my staff, and this isn't an ASO or a community-based organization in Australia, two of my staff, when I came out as someone who had been diagnosed with HIV, went to my boss and said that they thought that I should no longer be in a management position, that I was no longer a good role model, because obviously I had failed to maintain my negative status. So,
well, there's a good example of stigma coming out where we least expect it, maybe. Tell me about you. I mean, you've talked about your partner a little bit. Tell me a little bit about other relationships or roles of greatest importance to you. Are you close or not with family, however you define that? Where do you find your strength in the people or services around you?
it's a great question. I think to acknowledge a couple of people in my life. Ken Morrison, who's here at this conference, has to be acknowledged, works in Canada. He was the person who I blame for all of this. Wrote me, and I was doing volunteer outreach in Edmonton. Wrote me in and said, "Oh, I'd like you to come and speak to this seminar." And I'm like, "Sure, yeah, no problem. It sounds like fun." I was in uni at the time, and I'm like, whatever. And so then he touched me in a great way in getting me involved in HIV. I think for many of us living with HIV, especially when we had to go through the horrible years of it all, I remember the very first person I met with HIV. His name was Andre, and I remember befriending Andre, even though I was scared to be friends with Andre. And I think I was scared because I didn't want to lose him, because I just thought he was the best character I had ever met in my life. And I wanted to be just like him. But I knew I would lose him, and he was sick already when I'd met him. And those were the years when there was really only one path and one thing to happen. The rest of the people, so sort of to jump forward to now, we live in this farm north of Melbourne. It's called Buggery Acres. And it's become a place of respite and a place of hope and a place of wonder in the middle of the bush for lots of younger people. Many living with HIV, but not all of them. But I have to say, my inspiration and my love of life right now comes from younger people. I have only accepted my non-binary status because of watching the bravery of younger people come out about their own, and felt comfortable enough that I could do that myself. So having younger people in my life has been an absolute blessing. I have opened up my heart, my home, and my language to them, call them my nephews, my nieces, my sons, my daughters, and acknowledge that as an important part of understanding their place in my life.
Amazing. Sounds like you all learn a lot from each other. So tell me a little bit about what it's been like for you to grow older with HIV, because you've now been living with HIV for 25 years. How have things changed over time, either for better or for worse?
Well, definitely for better. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, you can't deny that protease moment when we found out about highly active antiretrovirals. I mean, there's just no doubt. No more did we have to fear that everyone we knew with HIV was going to die, and that Lazarus effect, when they literally, people were like raising out of their deathbeds. It was just like it was like miraculous. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was incredible. So yes, absolutely, it's way better now. And there is still so much more we can do. The drugs are so much better now. It's like one a day. Soon, it looks like we're going to have long-acting formulations, so it could be even easier than one a day. But that doesn't deny, I think, the pain and the challenge of being older in a Western culture, and the place that you get put because you're over 50 or whatever. Let's take a marker, right? How lonely that can be, how easily we are dismissed as older people, how I wish I could keep up with my younger family and friends. I don't really want to. What I want to do is just hear that they're having a great time. But yeah, look, your body changes. It gets older. My knees are shot. I'm wider around the middle than I've ever been in my whole life. But it is also about celebrating the fact that I'm even able to have those things. When I was diagnosed, I have to say I was pretty lucky, because it was post-protease moment in 1998. I did also, I didn't really think I was going to die from HIV. I thought I was going to die from something else, obviously. I mean, we all have those mortality thoughts, don't we? But boy, your body really changes as you get older. And that's the stuff that I'm struggling with.
Thanks for that. I find it interesting because you spoke very eloquently about ageism and experiencing that. But I think from your previous comments, you're surrounded by young people who don't have that view of you, as slowing down or being, any of the stereotypes that often get associated with aging. So where do you think that ageism really shows for you? Like, is it when you go out to the bar, or is it when you seek services, or is it from internally that you feel aged?
I think we all experience ageism differently. For me, I feel it in my body. I feel my body aging. Like literally feel my body aging. And the things I would have loved to have been able to do more of, I wish I could continue to do them at the same pace. I don't feel it in my head. Like, I don't feel it in my head. Having had COVID and having COVID fog, let me tell you, I think I know what that feeling is, but I don't feel like I'm aging in my head. Keeping and cultivating young people around me, I see both as a blessing for me and a blessing for them. They have been exposed and we have regular intergenerational discussions about things. They want to understand, what was disco like when it was first came out, right? And like, they want to understand all those things, and they want to ask someone. And I feel honored when they ask me those questions. At the same time, I want to understand how to use TikTok. Will I use TikTok? No. But I'm kind of interested in how they perform and go through life. And that sharing, I think the thing we have to do to break down ageism is create purposeful spaces for intergenerational dialogues, purposeful spaces, not occasional ones that happen because we think it's going to happen. No, purposeful spaces where we talk to each other, and we talk to each other as friends and as mates, and we build those spaces so that they're safe for both players and all the players in between. In the same way we have to do that around feminism, in the same way we have to do that around racism. I think we have to build the spaces, make sure they're safe, and then all of these things come out. I mean, the respect that I get from my younger friends and family, I feel I give back to them as well. It has to go both ways.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I like that ongoing suggestion. It can't just be a one shot, let's talk about what's the same and different for us, and then let's never do it again. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what the response to HIV and aging looks like in Australia. Are there opportunities for older people to access peer support? Does healthcare or HIV care address age-related changes? What's sort of the Australian experience, if you will?
I think there's two Australian experiences of aging with HIV. There's the one that if you are a gay man that you experience, and that is a lot easier, to be frank. There are those who understand. We have an incredibly homogenic epidemic in Australia. Like, overwhelming numbers of people living with HIV are gay men, right? And it's aging, right? So like, it is a very, so when you talk to people who have HIV, they're almost always older, and they're almost always gay men. And I think the healthcare system is very used to them, especially the HIV care system is very used to gay men. However, I think it's a very different reality if you're cisgendered, if you're a woman, if you're a person of color, if you're Indigenous. I think it is very challenging to age with HIV in Australia, because there aren't places where you can readily find other women, older women with HIV. There are, but they're very, very few. And when I say very few, I'm talking like 12 max in the country. Like, it is just not, it's not a diverse epidemic. It was controlled early on by the Australian government, and therefore it never really had viral escape into the general community. And so being part of those other communities, I think, is very challenging. As a gay man or as a gay person living with HIV, there's a little bit more around me. Our ASOs, or community-based organizations aren't as prolific as lots of countries, especially Canada. We don't have a lot of differentiation. So each state has kind of a peak body for people living with HIV, and then they have programs and services. But we are a big country like Canada, and they're all concentrated in metro regions. Very difficult if you're living outside of a metro region. Hopefully, new tech will help get people connected even more. But I mean, I think, yeah, there's two realities. Those that are gay men or identify that or are aligned with that, and those that are not.
Thanks. I think I would agree that's similar here in Canada. I think in the major urban centers, we have pretty good support and services for gay men living with HIV. Maybe less so for the other populations that you mentioned. So tell me, you've talked about your connection with youth in your community, and I think that's really awesome. What's one other strategy that you use to live and age well with HIV?
Okay, I think there are two strategies that I'd like to address that I think people aging with HIV. One is about looking after your head and your gray matter and what goes on, and keeping it exercised, and being connected to cognition. And that's what my partner does. And he is very good. So he's, at the age of 50, decided he wanted to become a lawyer, has become a lawyer, and is now, one of the best practicing in community law, I believe, in Melbourne. And then there are those who invest in caring for their heart. And I'm not saying I'm not cerebral. Also, he's just learned French. He studies French every single morning. Unbelievable. Like, he speaks really good French as someone who, grew up learning French, it's taught him the whole. Anyway, he's cultivated his heart, his head, and his head is amazing and his brain is exceptional. For me, I cultivate my heart and I invest in my heart. I invest in love. I share it widely. I believe in finding someone new to love every single day, because it's so important to me. For me, holding close my heart as I age is something I think is important. But those are just two examples. I think that there are different things for different people as they get older, where they find they invest in and they need to invest in, and it gives them the beauty and the wonder and the happiness that we all are endlessly searching for.
Great answer. I do think it's very individual what works for people. So what's one thing that you look forward to in the future? And then what's one thing that still feels uncertain for you about the future?
I look forward to a cure. And monkey spot pox scares the shit out of me. Sat in that session today and I had tingles run, like this morning. I had tingles run down my spine and I had flashbacks of things like when they started showing the numbers and then they showed, the presentations. Then they're like, but we don't know how it presents in upwards of 20 people. I was like, fuck. That scares the shit out of me. And I'm terrified about it getting out of control in the same way we let HIV get out of control.
Yeah. And many of the powers that be are not inspiring too much confidence right now in taking swift action. So I can appreciate your worry. As far as your aging with HIV, what challenges might you anticipate as you continue to grow older in Australia?
Connecting with community. I think as we tell the young'uns at Buggery Acres, I'm investing in you so that I don't have to wipe my own ass when I get to that point, and that they're going to look after me. And they think I'm joking. They think it's very funny. And I'm like, no, I'm dead serious, girl. I'm dead serious. I'm investing in you now because I don't want you to be looking after me. Oh, the other thing, don't ever put me in a home. I don't know how everyone else feels about this, but I am terrified of going into any aged care facility. I don't care if it's Shangri-La, Buckingham Palace style aged care. I don't want it. I want to age in my home with my friends and my family around me. And that's the thing that, I mean, that's my choice. We are working together, me and my partner, to make sure that our space is that way, because we both believe in that. I don't think aged care facilities, at least in Australia, have a very good understanding about diversity at all. I think they're woefully under-resourced. I think we like lots of cultures we don't respect, or do we look after our elderly appropriately? It's appalling, absolutely appalling. So there's no way in hell I want to be in one of them. So that's the part I fear most. But what I'm loving most is bringing all these young people into my life.
So are there any thoughts, questions, interaction points from the audience before I...
I'm very interested when you talked about intergenerational work. Like we have, young people who were born with HIV, who sometimes have the same amount of time as me who acquired HIV, and intergenerational work. I mean, we didn't do that very well through the 80s and 90s with HIV. And I think if we are smart, we will mentor those. So I'm with you because I don't want to go in no home either. I want to die in my house. So how do we continue that conversation? And since you brought up the idea, how can we do it globally? And how can we have a support system?
Great question. So how can we take for lack of a better word, the model, the things you're doing on your farm, and like systematize that and make that something that's available to anyone, even if they don't live where you live?
Yeah, that's okay. Well, here I'll tell you exactly what it is. Be brave. Reach out to young people. Be brave. They are not scary. They're not scared of you. There's a young person over there right now who has been to the Acres, and reached out to him. I reached out to him. I said, I love what you're saying. I think that's fucking brilliant, right? And plus, in some cases we have more resources. Not all of us, but some of us have more resources than young people. Let's look after them, bring them into our lives, give them shelter, give them food. God, I love cooking. Like, if you come over, the first question I get is, what would you eat on your death row? Because that's what I'm making. So I think reach out to young people. Don't be afraid of young people. They actually really do want to know. They really do want older friends. I really believe that. I have to say, when I told you my opening story about being afraid of my first person that I met with HIV, I want to pick up on the question that you asked me. I was horrible in the 80s and 90s. I was so afraid of older people. I was terrified of them. And it was because I was afraid I was going to lose them. And you know what? Young people don't have to be afraid of that anymore. They're not going to lose us. But you know what? And they want to know us. Do not be afraid to reach out to them.
Thank you so much, Liz. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I want to know where you got your shoes, first of all. They look so good. Second, I wanted to say you speak with working with youth. Do you have Indigenous youth as well that you work with? I know in Canada we have very separate programs, and there's not a lot of safety for Indigenous people in this country to come to programs about HIV. But in Indigenous ways of knowing, which clearly I'm a white girl walking, I'm not pretending to know those things, just in elder care and in caring for older people, have you had experience with younger people who are from Indigenous communities in Australia and in your region that perhaps might bring those types of things to other young people so they could learn a different way of engaging with older adults and maintaining that community instead of separating out as we do?
That's a great question. I think in many ways, Australia has the same sort of background as Canada, Europe, UK, lots of those sort of white global north countries where we don't respect older people. What is different, I find, in Australia is that we're very close to Asia. We have a strong Asian influence. Well, I mean, we are in Asia, let's just be honest. And that culture those cultures have very different approaches to older people and respect them and honor them and bring them into their lives in a much different way. So at the Acres, or our friendship circle, I think is pretty diverse. It's very male, I have to say, but not strictly male, but overwhelmingly male. There's people of color, yes, who've been to the Acres and that we support and that we love and we call family. And then there are those that I am super keen on seeing them to come and visit, especially those who are non-binary and who are trans and who are struggling. And we have a very special young man in our life called Tyler. We call him our son. He is definitely our son, and we're now sending him away to Taiwan to do his studies. And we're scared, just like any parent would be, but he's a young gay man who we found and found us, and we've become family. And I think there is no limit to family. What is that analogy? It ain't pie. There's more than enough to go around for everyone. And the more love you share, the more love you get back, basically.
I have one very abstract question. Do you have animals on this farm?
Yes, we have animals. We have goats, we have chickens, we have about 100 kangaroos that run through the property morning and night, dusk and dawn, because they're more nocturnal. We have every kind of animal. We live off grid in a mud brick house that looks a bit like a hobbit house.
And so my remaining question is, when can I come? Yeah. Join me, please, in thanking Brent for being here and for sharing their experience. Thank you so much.